I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week we're going to be breaking down the BAFTAs. The BAFTA winners just happened. I wanted to give you some of my thoughts and help us understand what the winners mean for the Oscars, which winners we should really take seriously, which we shouldn't. All of that is coming up next. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week and have been since the beginning of Oscar season back in October, now in our 8th year, is try to predict what's going to get nominated for the Oscars and then of course what's going to win for the Oscars. But at the end of the day, ultimately help you trying to make your own predictions. I give you the information, I give you some of the stats, some of my own personal thoughts, but ultimately try to give you all of the information you need to make your own educated decision. Now the BAFTA has just happened. I'm going to essentially break down this video into 3 parts. And the first part is just listing some categories where the winners were expected. Those are what's going to happen at the Oscars. That's the sort of first category. Second category, I'm going to be talking about a couple of winners that won at BAFTAs, but I actually don't think it really means anything for the Oscars and that the favorites are still the favorites. And then a bunch of categories in the third category and the third section of this video in which I discuss winners at BAFTA that indicate maybe the future of the Oscars, or at the very least make it an interesting race. So without further ado, let's jump into things. This first section of the video, just briefly I want to mention, these are the categories that I think are kind of locked for the Oscars. The winners at BAFTA that I think will repeat at the Oscars, those being director for Chris Nolan, supporting acting categories, so Da'Vine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers and Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer. Both gave good speeches and didn't tank their chances and have won everywhere. Score, Ludwig Göransson for Oppenheimer will win. International film, The Zone of Interest, pretty self-explanatory. Editing, I think, as well for Oppenheimer. Cinematography, Oppenheimer. Poor Things won BSC, but the fact that it didn't win here, I think, still shows good support for cinematography to go to Oppenheimer. Documentary should be 20 Days in Mariupol. And film, Best Picture, I think Oppenheimer winning here, not a huge surprise. I still think it's going to win at the Oscars. Then the second section of this video, I wanted to talk about a couple of winners at BAFTA and a couple of categories that I think the favorites are still likely to win, but because of the BAFTA going their own unique way, they're technically still not locks. And those two categories being makeup and sound. And every year you have to try to figure out which categories of BAFTA winners are not going to overlap and repeat at the Oscars, and which will. That's kind of the hard part about predicting, is trying to figure out, okay, this really means an important thing. The fact that Cillian Murphy won here is really important, but the fact that maybe Poor Things won in makeup is less so. Those are the kinds of things you try to figure out when looking at these precursor award shows like BAFTA. So what I did is I went through for the past 10 years. I included all the categories that overlap with the Oscars and the winners at BAFTA, aside from the acting categories, because they have their unique jury system. I didn't think it was fair to compare the BAFTAs with the Oscars in terms of accuracy in the acting categories. But aside from the acting categories and the best film category, I looked at everything else, all of the other categories, and I found that on average, BAFTA usually gets about 4 categories wrong per year. That means they'll, give the favorite best costume design, but then Black Panther will win at the Oscars. So the question then you have to ask yourself is, which of those 4 categories is BAFTA going to get wrong? And I think a couple of them that make immediate sense to me are makeup and sound. Makeup just being because, now I do want to mention actually for makeup, the Makeup and Hairstyling Guild Awards haven't been announced at the time of filming, so they may upend this prediction, but I still think Maestro is the frontrunner to win. I think the fact that they are transforming real people, famous people, into real people versus Poor Things, which is, still fantastical. I think that kind of makeup will be appreciated more so by the Academy. I also think Maestro is going to be a more well-liked movie at the Academy than it was at BAFTA, because Leonard Bernstein is an American figure and Maestro did better with American voters. And of course, the Academy has predominantly American voters, whereas BAFTA is only British voters. So it makes sense why a movie like Poor Things, which is a British film, an international film, would overperform at BAFTA and win in a category like makeup. Still, I think that the Oscars will go with Maestro because of, I think they're going to like the movie more. I think they like actually the transformation of famous people into real people versus the fantasy element that Poor Things does. And I think the respect of Kazuhiro, who's been won multiple times at the Oscars, will repeat and show up again for Maestro. And then the sound category, I thought that was an interesting win by The Zone of Interest, but another film that is British, from an English director, so I expected that movie to overperform, in which I did think it did at the BAFTAs in terms of winners like this category. We also see a strong connection between the best sound category and the best editing category. It's notable that The Zone of Interest is not nominated for Best Editing, which really hurts its chances, because aside from last year, if you look at the past 15 Best Sound and Editing winners, they overlap 12 out of the 15 times. That means pretty much every year the Best Sound winner is also the Best Editing winner. There's a clear correlation between those two categories. So the fact that The Zone of Interest is not even nominated for Best Editing means it's not going to win that category. So it's probably also not going to win for Best Sound, just because of how Oscar voters correlate those two. So we have Poor Things overperforming in makeup, The Zone of Interest overperforming in sound. That makes sense. Those are two English international films which have been more appreciated by this international group versus the Academy, which is international as well, but still the primary voting base is Americans. So that will change their taste, of course. And then now in this third section of this video, I wanted to talk about all the other categories, the categories where the winners give us some insight into what's going to win, but I think all these categories are still kind of a foot race and unsureness to all these categories going into Oscar night. So let's start off with the two big acting categories, actor and actress. In the actress side, I think Emma Stone needed to win here. Her big kind of win of the night was the fact that she won. I think if she lost to someone like Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall, it would indicate to us that Emma Stone is maybe less of a contender than maybe we had thought, that maybe it was Lily Gladstone's to lose. But the fact that Emma Stone won here just shows another sort of sign of support that she really is a strong contender to win the Oscar, because she's won at Golden Globes, because she's won at Critics' Choice, now she's won here, giving her a lot of momentum. I think the fact that BAFTA, which is usually after SAG, but this year is before SAG, SAG voting doesn't close until a week from now. So, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at the BAFTA nominations and winners, on Monday morning, and that will influence some of their picks. I do think that will affect the SAG voting and who wins there. Now, it may be crazy to say that BAFTA will go 4 for 4, given how poor they did last year, for example. But I do think that Emma Stone is the front runner to win right now. She needed to win here. She needed to not lose out to someone like a Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall. And if she wins SAG, naturally I think she's going to win the Oscar. But the fact that she's been sort of winning everywhere she needs to does lead me to believe that she ultimately will win SAG and then ultimately the Oscar, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. And then on the actor side of things, Cillian Murphy needed to win here. If Giamatti won here, it would be pretty much a wrap, given that Giamatti won the Globes, Critics' Choice, and then if he won BAFTA, that would have been sort of enough. But I do think that now we have a bit of a strong race. Cillian Murphy was expected to win here, being an Irishman himself, just over the pond to England, so you have that connection there for voters and him. Of course, him working on a lot of English productions as well, Ken Loach films, what have you. There's a connection there to England, so I expected him to win there. Now, SAG, I think will ultimately determine the winner in both the acting categories for actress and actor. Whoever wins SAG, I probably will predict at the Oscars, unless it's something, really crazy and out there. So Cillian Murphy, this was a big win for him today, even though it was expected. He needed to win here in order to really compete for the Oscars. And in a weird way, I'm actually a little bit more confident that Murphy wins the Oscar than Giamatti, more so than I am Stone will win the Oscar over Gladstone, just because I could see a situation where Gladstone wins SAG and then Murphy wins at SAG, and then that kind of confuses things. But right now, I think the frontrunners still in both categories are Emma Stone and Cillian Murphy, and BAFTA reassured that for me. The Best Animated Feature category is also an interesting one that I want to note, just because this was a bit of a surprise for me, The Boy and the Heron winning here, because it also won at the Golden Globes. So the way I see the animated feature race is, it's a sort of two-way race between The Boy and the Heron and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Boy and the Heron has the benefit of the Golden Globes, getting the win there, but also here at BAFTA. But Spider-Verse isn't, out of the race at all, because it won at the Annies for Best Animated Feature, and also won at Critics' Choice. So they sort of have two apiece in terms of industry and journalist support, one each, for the both of the films. So at the end of the day, I think I'm still going to predict Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature, just because it has the popularity that The Boy and the Heron does. It's probably more well seen, so when you have all members of the Academy voting on every single category, I think popularity does help, which is why we've seen movies like Toy Story 4 beat out a movie like Klaus, even though Klaus won at BAFTA. So I do think the popularity, the ease of sentimentality that can be accessed towards Across the Spider-Verse, where Boy and the Heron is a little bit more of a dense, mysterious kind of a film, will ultimately, that sort of populist element of Spider-Verse as compared to Boy and the Heron will ultimately push it over the edge. But the Boy and the Heron winning here does make it, a race. Still, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse winning the Annie for Best Animated Feature, which usually gets it right about 70% of the time, and added in the fact of the popularity of the film, I do think that will be enough for a win. Although it's still, this one here did make it an interesting race. Then the Best Adapted Screenplay category is one I wanted to talk about because I think we really had a unique development here. I think going into BAFTA, I thought Oppenheimer was the frontrunner to win, just because we've had so many Best Picture winners also win for screenplay, but American Fiction had a big win here tonight. The fact that it won for Best Adapted Screenplay, despite the movie only having one nomination at BAFTA, I thought was a huge sign of support. I thought this movie was not going to win here because they hadn't nominated in any other categories. I thought they hadn't liked it as much as some of the other movies like in Oppenheimer. So that's a real strong sign of support that it won here. And then of course it also won at Critics' Choice Awards. So it has the momentum going in its way. I do think the Oscar voters starting to see this as Nolan, he's going to win for director, he's going to win for picture. It's a directorial achievement. We don't need to double up and give him the writing achievement too. Now, it could still happen at the Oscars. I still think Oppenheimer's going to win for Best Picture. And we've seen, writer-directors like Alejandro Inarritu or Bong Joon-ho win for directing and screenplay and picture and sort of, complete the sweep there. But it does seem like, just based on the fact that American Fiction won in Critics' Choice, beating out Oppenheimer, and then won here, beating out Oppenheimer again, gives me enough support to kind of push that over the edge. And then also you think about the movie itself. It's clever, it's original, it's funny. It does feel like a screenplay winner. It won the TIFF People's Choice Award. In past TIFF People's Choice Award winners like Belfast and Jojo Rabbit and Green Book also won screenplay awards. So it does make sense as this sort of, the fact that American Fiction overperformed in terms of nominations at the Oscars, getting in for Sterling K. Brown, getting in for Best Original Score. The fact that it overperformed at the Oscars and actually underperformed at BAFTA and still won at BAFTA indicates to me that I think adapted screenplay, we have a new frontrunner, and I actually do think American Fiction is a frontrunner to win. And then on the original side, in original screenplay, Anatomy of a Fall here, winning was expected, but also a big sign of support. The Holdovers hasn't won really anywhere, so I wouldn't really predict that, although I wouldn't put that, I guess I would put that in the number 2 slot. But the fact that Anatomy of a Fall won here, also won for Best Screenplay at the Globes, and the fact that, its competition, like a movie like The Holdovers, didn't win original screenplay at, let's say, Critics' Choice Awards because Barbie was competing in that category, does give us some insight into Anatomy of a Fall being a generally well-respected film. I don't think it's going to get editing. I think this is going to be its only above-the-line win, but I do think that the support is there enough to give it the original screenplay prize, and also as a way to sort of reward Justine Triet, the director, and they also had a very funny speech at BAFTAs, so I do think that will maybe add a low 1-2% chance of them winning. So I think, going into this that BAFTA award show, I thought the screenplay categories were really up in the air. I wasn't sure what was going to win. So the fact that we had some clarity to the both of them, I thought was really interesting. That I do think we have clear frontrunners going into the Oscars of American Fiction and Anatomy of a Fall. We still could see surprises, particularly, I think, in the adapted screenplay category. But it will be fun to see come the Oscars. But I do feel a little bit more confident in my picks after BAFTA in the screenplay categories. Then the production design / costume design category was very interesting. I expected Poor Things to win here, but actually, since the recording of our last Oscar video, we haven't talked about the Art Directors Guild Awards. So there's a little bit of a heart versus brain, or a gut versus brain situation going on here. So Poor Things, let's just look at production design right now. Poor Things won at BAFTA, won at the Art Directors Guild, beating out Barbie, which I think is really big. But yet I still look at a movie like Barbie, which won at Critics' Choice Awards, which reminds me so much of Black Panther in the sense of 2018. Yorgos Lanthimos, who's the director of Poor Things, his last movie, The Favorite, won BAFTA for costume design and production design, and yet lost to a big American blockbuster movie in Black Panther in those two categories at the Oscars. And I can't help have this feeling that's going to happen again, where Poor Things is going to miss out and Barbie's going to get those two categories. And then Barbie has a lot of the statistical analysis of, they have past nominees and past winners in both the production design and costume design categories, which really helps the chances. And those two categories usually like to reward past nominees, and the costume design category likes to reward past winners. So I'm really conflicted on this one. But the fact that, I think my brain tells me, hey, the favorite beat out Barbie at the Art Directors Guild, that's big. It also beat out Barbie at BAFTA, that's big as well. And yet I still can't sort of see the parallels and some of the, favoritism towards past winners, and think that it's going to go for Barbie in both the production design and costume design categories. It could be a split as well, but the Costume Design Designers Guild, their awards won't tell us anything because Barbie and Poor Things are not competing against each other, so we won't have any insight there. I think right now I lean Poor Things, but it's going to be real tough to figure out come Oscar night. And then also the final category I just want to mention here is the visual effects category, which I still think is really the toughest to predict, because Poor Things won here, and Poor Things is not nominated at the Oscars, so that doesn't give us any insight. You could say that this is a benefit to Godzilla -1 because it technically didn't lose because it wasn't nominated at BAFTA, but it wasn't nominated at BAFTA, so does it really have the international support to win at the Oscars? I don't know. But then you could say the creator lost because it lost the award to Poor Things. But then you could also say Napoleon lost because it lost as well. I think what it does sort of give us an insight into is that the creator isn't some, obvious movie that's going to clean sweep and win everything. And that they went with Poor Things probably because they liked the movie the best, which is why I would have predicted Poor Things to win visual effects had it been nominated. So right now it actually maybe leans me towards a movie like Napoleon, just because it has the most nominations of the visual effects nominees at the Oscars. And we have a year where it's not obvious that it's the creator's award or obvious that it's Godzilla -1. It may just go to the visual effects movie that is the most well-liked, which in this group I think is Napoleon. But it's going to be really tough to see come Oscar night. And then I guess the final thing I want to think about is in reference to my stat that I brought up earlier, which was about 4 categories that the BAFTAs get wrong every single year. So look at the BAFTA winners and try to pick out at least 4, maybe even 5, not including the acting categories, that you think will not repeat at the Oscars. For me, it was relatively easy. I think makeup is going to go to Maestro. I think sound is going to go to Oppenheimer. So those 2 categories right there, BAFTA I think got wrong. I think Best Animated Feature is going to go to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So I think, that's one. And then Visual Effects, Poor Things is not nominated. So it's not going to win the Oscar. So there you have 4 categories that I think are going to, the BAFTAs are going to get quote-unquote wrong. But then maybe, SAG will tell us something, or maybe the Barbie movies will win in production design and costume design and will be, even more wrong. But I do recommend you look at that and look at the BAFTA winners and not just go, okay, I'm going to predict the BAFTA winners are going to be the Oscar winners. That pretty rarely happens. You want to predict some categories in which BAFTA got wrong and go something different with the Oscar predictions. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though, in the comments down below as to what those movies would be. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts on the BAFTA award show. Did you enjoy it? Did you watch it live or with that 2-hour delay? And are you confident or less confident in your Oscar predictions after the BAFTAs? I'd love to hear that in the comments down below. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.